Welcome to Doing It My Way by Beata Matras, a podcast about project and product management, communication, brand, and IT. All these topics will definitely improve and have a positive impact on your career. So join me today, subscribe, and expect a new episode every week. Thank you. Today, I have an inspiring guest, Keji Adedeji, the product director at the Financial Times. Keji has a wealth of experience in product leadership across various industries, including edTech, customer engagement, travel, e-commerce, and video consumer insights. She is passionate about solving customer problems, building agile teams, and empowering product managers to excel. In these episodes, we'll explore Keji's journey, her insights on overcoming our gremlins, and the challenges and triumphs of being a leader in product management. Welcome to the show, Keji. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hi, Beata. Thank you for inviting me and having me on the show. It's really great to join you today. Looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, me too. Me too. So I will start with the first question. So, Keji, could you start by giving our listeners a brief overview of your background and your journey in the professional world?
Absolutely. So, like a lot of, if not most product people, I've had a bit of a winding road into product management. So before starting in product management, I actually started my career in tech. I'm ashamed to say 18 years ago. I feel, it just makes me feel so old now. But prior to that, I had a short life as an attempted apparel e-commerce entrepreneur with my best friend. We used eBay as our channel back in those days. It was short-lived. We even had a shop for a while where we were selling t-shirts and all kinds of apparel. And I'm pretty sure we probably broke a lot of copyright rules because we were using logos from retro computer games and computer systems, Commodore, Atari, that kind of thing. And then I was doing that during my master's, and then I was an execution-only share trader. So that what that means is I didn't make any decisions about what to buy or sell. I just took instructions over the phone, and then I executed the deals on the computer system. So I did that for a little while. And then my last job before getting into tech was working in a production office at a factory that made alcohol for basically white labeled alcohol for supermarkets. So in the UK, if you go to a supermarket and you buy, I don't know, vodka by Sainsbury's, the company that I worked for probably made it. And I worked in this production office with these, like a bunch of old men in white lab coats. And we looked out onto a factory floor. And my job was to go to the factory floor and get production data from the people working on the factory floor and then make reports. So that's kind of like my storied professional history before I got into tech. And then my first job in tech was on a was in a graduate program as a software tester, believe it or not. So that's where I started my career in tech. In that company, I then wore pretty much every hat you can imagine on my journey to product management. So I was a business analyst. I did project management. I did software testing. I did implementations. I would train customers. I would do support for customers. And I did that all in a team where an engineer had come up with a business idea, a product idea. He'd found a customer problem that he thought was big enough to make a product out of. He'd written a business case, and then the leadership actually invested in it, and they built this team. So I got in on that team, wore all of these hats, and then realized that the thing I really wanted to do was what that engineer was doing, everything except for the engineering part of it. And as part of that, I did some product owner training. And so that was when I learned about product management. I think I Googled it and realized there was a thing called product management. And then that's how I ended up becoming a product manager. So that's kind of how I got into products. And then since then, I've worked in multiple industries. So I've predominantly worked in enterprise B2B SaaS. I've had a lot of experience in edTech. But I've also worked in lots of other industries to try and broaden my skill set as a product manager. So I'd say that that's kind of my background in product management. The last 3.5 years, I've made a shift into product leadership. And so that's where I am at the moment, still making my way in product leadership.
Yeah, that's very interesting. It sounds like various experiencing before even like moving to product management and wearing before a lot of hats. So that was like a great, I think, training for you before moving to product management and then product leadership. But if you look at your product career, specifically in your product career, have there been any like significant milestones in your career so far?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I'd spent quite a bit of time in edtech, and that was at a company called Talis, and I'm really proud of my time at Talis. I worked there twice actually. The first time I was a PM, I think I was employee number 10. I was the sole PM for pretty much most of my time there, and this is where I really cut my teeth as a product manager. So I tried and failed and learnt lots of PM lessons along the way. And as part of that team, we grew from scratch and launched and grew two very successful edtech products that essentially created a category of software at the time, and they were market leading. And we took them to multiple regions. That company eventually got acquired by a major academic publisher called Sage, and is now part of what is called the Technologies from Sage Group. They acquired a number of technology companies around the same time. So I'm really proud of my time there, because that's where I think I really learned to be a PM. Like I said, learned many lessons, learned many through many failures as well during that time. But the success we had in that team was really formative for me as a product manager. Um, as I mentioned, I worked there twice, so I was invited to come back to take my first leadership role, which happened right as the pandemic kicked off. So I think they announced me as product leader the week that the country shut down, basically. So it was kind of a trial by fire entry into product leadership. I think it was a crisis leadership, to be honest. And so I'm proud of my time there, because I think that whilst it was a crisis leadership role, um, I'm really proud of the strategy that put in place for that team, and also how I grew and developed the teams there. And I'm also really proud of the roles where I got to successfully embed product practices into an organization that didn't necessarily have them really embedded yet, and where I got to mentor other PMs successfully. And two examples that come to mind there are my time at National Express, which is my stint in B2C at the National Express, which is a big transport company, on the digital team, and also at Vox Pop Me as well. Those were two great experiences for me.
Yeah, what you mentioned about the crisis leadership and like being put into a challenge that you wasn't aware that will happen. Yeah, we couldn't predict that the COVID will come and will appear, and we will all be in a difficult situation. But I was looking at the reports on the challenges that we face and what develops us the most, and like the first thing which most people mention was actually the business challenges. Yeah, so I think in your from your story, I can like assume that this is true, and you can even if you're not prepared, you can do a great job and you can grow.
Yeah.
And about your product leadership, you have been with the Financial Times for almost a year now. What does the role as a product director entail?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually about to wrap up my time at the FT, so it is coming up to a year, and I will be wrapping that up and moving on soon. But as a product director at the FT, I work in the FT professional part of the business, and that's essentially the B2B part of the business. So a lot of people, I guess, from the outside, when they think about the Financial Times, they think about the B2C part of the business. They think about the newspaper, ft.com, and that experience. But there's this whole other experience, which is the B2B experience, where we sell the FT to organizations. And so I work in that part of the business, and I manage two group product managers and oversee six product teams. So my roles really involved leading a cross-functional vision and strategy setting exercise for FT Professional. And in doing that, the big challenge with something like that is bringing everyone along in communication and making sure that that's really well understood and sets that direction for the team. And I think the challenge that we have in FT Professional on the B2B side of the business is that we are trying to diversify our product portfolio. We're trying to come up with new products, and we're trying to create an FT professional experience that is creating additional value for B2B customers over and above the B2C experience, so that we can kind of continue to drive our revenue growth. So my focus has been, how do we align kind of those goals, what we're trying to do in the product, with the B2B commercial teams, and what are our actual customer needs, in an organization like the FT, where if you think about who the readers of the FT are, it's so broad. We have such a broad readership across multiple industries, across multiple roles. So when we're trying to understand what is the user need, what is a B2B product, what is a B2B experience for a reader of the FT, we need to make sure that we're really aligned with commercial teams and what we believe those are, and narrowing that down on those. So a lot of the time is working through with the product teams, but also very closely with commercial teams to make sure that we've got that alignment. Also, a lot of my time's been spent in helping the team develop the skills for identifying those new product opportunities, and for essentially 0 to 1 uh, product innovation and development, which is something I think that FT is evolving to get good at. Prior to this role, I directly managed product managers as a product leader. So it was me, and then it was a bunch of product managers. So one of the things I've had to learn here, and I've been learning and continue to learn, is what it means to manage and lead the people who are leading product managers. So there's now group product managers and then the product managers. So I'm just like that one level removed from the PMs who are working on the products. So that's been a lesson for me in what does it mean to lead people who are leading others. And also, in a large matrix organization like the FT, I've been learning many new lessons, and this is not that I've not done this before, but I think there's just a new dimension to it in an organization like the FT, of what it means to communicate with a broad set of stakeholders, and what it means to manage upwards in the organization, somewhere like the FT. So those are the things that take up my time, and that's what the role entails, and those are the things that I've been learning in the time I've been there.
And one thing is very interesting for me about like how do you balance the demands of product leadership and like you have to develop the new product, the new offering, you have to work with the commercial teams, but also foster the supportive and empowering the team like environment. How do you balance that?
With great difficulty, I think sometimes. I feel like I need to qualify all of my answers with the fact that I very much feel like I'm still always learning how to be better and how to improve in these things. I think what I've learned and continue to learn, not just at the FT, but across my experience so far in product leadership, is that providing, I think that I've been most successful where I've been able to provide clarity through clear goal setting and through clear communication. I think when I've not done my best, that's when those things have fallen over. And ensuring that to create really empowered teams, I think you need to ensure that the team has got the right skills. And if they don't have the right skills, that you're coaching them or helping them to develop that, or giving them training to get the right skills, that they have the right tools in place. So the tools that we use to understand our data, the tools that we use to develop our software, the tools that we use to integrate with other things, they all have to be in place. And the right guardrails for decision making, the right tools and the guardrails for decision making, or a framework for decision making that make sure that they can be enabled to just get on with the work. And I think the other thing is, if you can manage to do those things, then part of your job is also to get out of the way and let them make the decisions. If you've put those things in place, let them make the decisions and let them get out of the way. It doesn't mean that you become absent. It just means that you create the space for the teams to just get on with the work, with the tools, the skills you've given them, the decision frameworks you've given them. And I don't think a team is truly empowered without this. And then in terms of being supportive, I think, again, I've been most successful when I've been able to be open and transparent as much as it's possible within a leadership role. Because obviously within leadership, there are some times where you can't always be completely open or transparent, but as much as it's possible with the things that are important, with what's going on in the business, with how we're performing, with our goals, with our the challenges we're facing, being as open and transparent as possible, and providing continuous feedback and recognition to the teams. I think also being a little bit open with your teams, allowing them to see you as a human, allowing them to see where where you have challenges. It's a fine balance of building confidence, and being motivational, but also allowing the teams to sharing your vulnerability with the team so that they see you as a human, they know that you're infallible, and being open to feedback and making sure that they understand that that is real, that is true, that they will be listened to, that they will be heard, and that their feedback is valued. Creating the space for coaching and development conversations. And one of the things I'm proud of that I've had positive feedback about along the way is that people have told me that I've helped them to think about how to shape their career progression through my coaching. So having the door open for conversations like that as well. I think my current manager asked me a question not that long ago, which is like, what proportion of your time are you spending on kind of thinking about the business and the strategy versus the kind of the day-to-day doing stuff. And in that conversation, I realized that the balance was off. So one of the things I've had to also learn is like how to let go of some of the things that I've been used to doing when I was an IC, when I was an individual contributor, or when I was a leader that directly managed the product managers versus being a leader that had GPMs in between me and the product managers. I think at every step you have to learn to let go of some of the things that you typically would have done yourself, and delegating is a tool as a leader that I'm constantly having to learn to do. So not being the blocker for your team, sometimes allowing the team to take things from you.
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of because the next question was supposed to be a key takeaways from your experience across different industries, but I think you just shared it.
Yeah.
Yeah, a great wealth of experiences. So I'm going to focus on something else,
Okay.
which is being vulnerable and being open with your team, of course, within certain boundaries. And you spoke about it at Mind the Product, and you spoke about the gremlins that product managers face.
Mm.
Can you elaborate on some of these common struggles, such as I have my notes because I watched it like 7 times already. um,
Yeah.
yeah, comparison and
Sure.
self-doubt, progression wall, imbalance. And
Mm.
yeah, I let you finish.
Yeah. Okay. So at that talk, I talked about these gremlins, these gremlins I think we all carry around. And the ones I talked about in that Mind the Product talk, I don't think are exhaustive, but I think they're the common ones that certainly in my own personal experience and in the conversations I've had with people that I've managed, mentored, coached, in the conversations that I've had in my own peer groups, people at my level, who've been going through the journey in product management along with me. I feel like these are the main ones that come across. So, and the experience that I talked about in that talk, I talked about that kind of my first leadership role at Talis being a crisis leadership. I think a lot of that crisis leadership contributed to to some of the burnout that I experienced, because that burnout actually happened at the end of that year. But I think it's also a condition of the nature of the role that we're in. We're not specialists. We're surrounded by specialists as product managers. We're surrounded by, within our product teams, we're surrounded by engineers, they're specialists. We're surrounded by designers or researchers who are specialists. Or if we go to our wider teams, commercial teams, salespeople, or support people, or marketing people, they're specialisms. And then you have product that spans kind of like the business, the technology, the design. And I think sometimes a lot of that feeds into the creation of these gremlins. So the main gremlins I talked about in the talk were comparison and self-doubt. They were the progression wall, they were imbalance, and they were major step changes of fear. So just to quickly summarize what those are about. Comparison and self-doubt are essentially about the pressure that comes from comparing yourself. We are very much growth minded people as product PMs. So we are constantly consuming a lot of content, a lot of ways to improve, a lot of narratives about what it means to be a good PM and what it means to not be a good PM. We're always looking at the big companies, the ones that do product the best, the ones that are unicorns, the ones that have had mega growth. And then you might not be in one of those companies, or even if you are, you're just thinking about like, am I doing product right? Um, am I doing proper product? You're you're wondering if you belong at the table. I think in the talk I talked about, especially if you come from an underrepresented group, you're wondering if you should be in the room at all, or if maybe that's the reason you're in the room in the first place. It could be about being in an organization that doesn't, you've read about how working the best way is, and you're in an organization, you think it's not working the best way, and you're trying to make it work the best way, but it's not. So you're constantly comparing yourself, and it feeds this self-doubt about your own capabilities. And I think self-doubt comes from a lot of that, but also about, when you start, like, you don't know everything. You have to learn, and that learning progress can feel hard, it can feel challenging, and so that makes you start to doubt yourself. So then I think the second one I talked about was
Progression wall.
progression wall. That is it. So this is the one about when you are trying to think about your career and what is next. What are the skills that I should learn next? There's a whole host of skills we have to learn as product people. It's about, how do you identify your gaps? How do you then fill those gaps? How do you decide which gaps to fill first? Do you have the opportunity to do so in the organization that you're in or not? And if you don't, what do you do about that? Can you do that within where you are? Do you need to go somewhere else to do that where you are? Or maybe you're ready to leave an organization, but you're not sure like how to make that next step, how to demonstrate that you've got the skills to get into an organization where you think you might improve your skills, but you first got to get over the hurdle of saying, well, I've got these skills to begin with. So it's really about the hitting a wall with your progression, or sometimes getting stuck somewhere because it's comfortable and not progressing as a consequence of that. So it's really about, how do you intentionally design um, your career progression, and do that with intentionality, and with with intentionality, and by figuring out what the right next steps, the right next type of company, the right next type of industry or scale of company that will give you the kind of work that is fulfilling and develops your skills. The next was imbalance. I think this is applicable to any role. This is not just product people. I think it's in any role in any industry, but I think particularly for product people, we are absolutely beset by the gremlin of imbalance. And this is, the sheer amount of things that we have to encounter in our roles. How does imbalance sneak into your life, I think is the term that I said in the talk. So, and I put this one in because I went through a burnout at the end of November 2020. So that at the end of that year of my first product leadership, at the end of the year of the pandemic, I had a major burnout. And it's because during that year, I think I was doing really great work, but I was also struggling with all of the other gremlins, and just kept pushing and kept pushing. And so imbalance snuck into my life in lots of ways, which led to a burnout. And so the reason I wanted to put this in here is because I don't think burnout happens like that. It's a there's that saying, a thousand tiny cuts. It's a process of a thousand tiny cuts, and it's about helping people just notice what those tiny cuts might be. And then the last one is about major step changes and fear. I think the one thing that I've observed is that fear can get in the way a lot. It makes us get in our own way a lot of the times, and fear is intricately linked to self doubt and comparison. I think if you're suffering from comparison, if you're suffering from self doubt, a lot of that is intrinsically tied to fear. But I link this one to major step change because, again, the experience that I had when I stepped into leadership is because not all progressions are made equal. There's going to be some points where you progress, or where you're on your journey, where you essentially, like, you start at the bottom again. You've been a PM, you've been growing the skills, learning the skills, going up this ladder, and then you get to the bit where you become a product leader. Everything's great, yeah, except everything you learn along the way. It's not that it's useless, but you need a whole new set of things to be good here. What got you here isn't what's going to get you there. And so you essentially kind of fall back to the bottom of a new, if you think of a ladder or a set of steps, you're back at the bottom of the steps. You have to learn a whole new set of things. You're suddenly going to be uncomfortable again, right? In a way that you've not been for a long time, because you've been developing your skills, you've been growing your capability, your confidence grows as your capability grows. And now, like, you realize you're at the bottom, you don't have that capability, you've got a whole new set of skills to learn. And normally, like, as product people, as growth mindset people, we usually should lean into that, and we tend to, we do lean into that. And it's not that I didn't, but it felt incredibly uncomfortable. It felt, I think I understood that what was happening there was a lot of fear, a lot of being afraid. The stakes when you get to a certain stage are fundamentally different. It impressed upon me the fact that, I now was responsible for people's progression, for people's development, for the company's performance. And so there's a lot of fear that was associated with that. And when you have these major step changes, you need to be aware of the fact that you need to really go into things with a beginner mindset again. And so those were the gremlins that I kind of talked about in the talk.
Yeah, there was also like this bonus gremlin, which was silence. So,
Yes. Yes, you're right. So silence is the bonus gremlin, and that I put that one in there because I wanted everyone to know. I mean, the reason I did the talk was because, like, I said in that talk, if only one person walked away thinking, "Oh my God, like, all of this makes sense to me. I'm not the only one." That would have felt like success to me. But it was even more successful for me because so many people, yourself included, reached out to me on the day, talked to me, have reached out to me since by email, by LinkedIn, to thank me for talking about this publicly, because they were feeling all of these gremlins and more. And they were feeling these things in silence, and they were feeling these things as though, like, they're the only PM in the world who doesn't know how to do X, and they're the only PM in the world who's feeling afraid, and they're the only PM in the world who's like feeling completely burnt out. And so silence is that killer that's happening to us all, because no one talks about the fact that these things are challenging. They are factors in what it takes to do our work. And so that's why I wanted to shout out silence. And I did it because the switch that was turned on for me was because I saw somebody else talk about their experience of burnout. And this was someone that I respected. This was someone that I thought, had been on their journey much longer than I was. I'm thinking, if this person who I really rate, who's, managing teams much larger than I, can talk about going through this, then absolutely it's okay that this is something that's happening to me. And I just wanted to do that for everyone else. So silence is the silent, it is the silent killer that's happening to everyone. Absolutely.
yeah. And I personally wanted to thank you for that speech because I still remember me sitting in a room full of my colleagues, product managers, and we were watching like remotely Mind the Product conference. And you started to talk about the gremlins, and I was like, oh my God, oh my God. I like it really resonated. And yeah, after even that speech, my friend texted me. She was also like watching that, and she was like, I think you love that speech. Yeah. Am I right? And I was like, yes, that's totally something that I was thankful for. And before, I wasn't aware that, we can speak about topics like that we can be so open, and we can hear about leaders, product leaders speaking not only about tools, skills, assessments, how to be better, but also share the vulnerability, being vulnerable and sharing their struggles, and that it's okay because it gives you a kind of freedom that, okay, I can feel, not perfect. I can feel bad and still work and still like, do my job. Sometimes I need a break.
Hmm.
Sometimes I need to take care of myself, and it's completely fine. It's okay. It's not the end of the world if we
It's
feel
not
like that.
failure. Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
failure, and you can still be successful and still have challenges like this, and it's okay to look after yourself too. Yeah.
Yeah. That was amazing. So thank you for that, KG.
You're welcome. Thank you for the feedback on that.
And I'm going to move to another question, which is about like the antidotes or strategies for product people to deal with like self doubt or other challenges that you just mentioned.
Yeah, so I think um, primarily it comes down to, I'd say like the one at the top of the list is probably self compassion and looking after yourself. Um, because we've all got that internal voice, that inner monologue that probably, I think I said this to a friend of mine recently, which is if you talk, would you ever talk to your best friend or a family member, someone you care about, or even a stranger, the way that you talk to yourself internally sometimes? And we all do it. Like, you'd be horrified if you said some of the things you said to yourself to a stranger or to someone that you love. And so I say this as being the top one, knowing from personal experience how difficult it can be, but having that self compassion, having that ability to talk to yourself in a kind way, to stop yourself from comparing yourself to others, to look after yourself. Because when things are hard, the basics, the things that are the basics in looking after ourselves are the things that fall by the wayside. And actually, they're contributing to us not being our best selves. So I'd say, like, at the top of the list for me is doing the basics of looking after yourself physically and mentally, but also finding a way to talk to yourself compassionately, like do whatever it takes. Some people write some people do affirmations. Some people have post-it notes on the walls for them. Some people have a technique where when they are you looking at post-it notes on the wall for yourself?
Yes.
Yes, I have some too. Some people have techniques where, when you hear yourself saying something, you think about, what would I say to X person, my best friend, my partner, whoever. How would I respond to them if they were thinking this? Whatever your tool is for finding a way to be self-compassionate, find a way to be that. But in order to do this well, I think the first one that I talked about was self-awareness. You've got to create the space to actually understand yourself on multiple dimensions. And I said in the talk, I think this is like, some people might think this is very woo woo stuff, but I do things like meditation and breath work. I take time at the end of every week. I have like there's a slot in my calendar at the end of every week where I do like a personal retro to understand how the week has been for me, both physically, mentally, in work, in my personal life, just so that I can keep track of what is going on for me, and understanding what works and what doesn't work. So you've got to do that work for yourself to actually develop and cultivate the self-awareness. But in order to cultivate self-awareness, you've got to create time for it, and it's really easy not to. It's like life is busy, you've got work, you've got your personal life, you go from one to the other, you've got, if you've got kids, you've got things to do with your kids. It's really hard to create that space, but it's also really easy to create that space. It could just be 10 minutes a day or 15 minutes at the end of the week, but find a way to do that. What that allows you to do is to start to learn about yourself, to learn about what what are your strengths, what are your challenges, what makes you afraid, what makes you happy, what makes you thrive, what are the conditions for you to be your best, what are the conditions for you to not be your best. You start to develop an awareness about these things, and that starts to feed into what you're doing on a daily basis, or how you make decisions about what you want to do next. So I'd highly recommend that, like, people find a way to create that space for themselves to do the, I guess, self-reflection, um, and self awareness. Another good way of doing that is to seek feedback. I think I talked about the fact that we're product people. We love discovery. We know how to do feedback. We do it really well. So how about you do that for yourself? So an exercise that I did not that long ago, just slightly before I got my job at the FT, actually, and more recently, with some people that I've mentored and coached in the past, is I actually went back to people and was like, can you talk to me? Tell me what my top three strengths are, and tell me some things that I could do better at. And I did that with every single, like, pretty much every boss that I'd ever worked with. And, in a moment where I probably needed it the most, I got just the most amazing feedback that helped me understand my strengths even more than I thought I already did. And from other people's perspective, it's an alternative to that narrative that you've got going on in your head that's not always kind. So that, yeah, there are moments where, like, I'm not feeling great. I'm thinking, oh, I'm not good at this. I could be better at this. I failed at this. And it's a tool that I whip out every now and then. It's in my Notion doc. I pull out this Notion doc and I read all the feedback that people have, positive feedback that people have given me about how I've helped them, how I've been successful for them in their business, how I've helped them navigate their product career, how I've helped them mentor them, how I've, how I've helped them in either their career, their job, how I've done well in for the business, that kind of thing. So cultivating self-awareness isn't something that you need to do on your own either. And then the other thing that I talked about is community, which I think is really, really important. So certainly as an individual product manager, when I didn't know what the hell I was doing, community was the first thing I ran to try and learn. But also, it's not just about the learning you get from communities, going to conferences and meetups and that kind of thing. It's the connections that you form. It's the support that you get. It's just as simple as understanding that there are plenty of people just like you who are going through the same challenges or typical challenges in their context. Some of my best friends have fallen out of communities. At every step in my career, with every decision that I've made, those people have been along the way, have been able to bounce things off them because they understand the context, they understand the challenges that we're going through. As I've transitioned into leadership, I need to find new communities, and some of the people from early on in my journey, I've been on that journey too. So we're there together, and I found it invaluable. It's really something that I would recommend that if you don't have or have not cultivated, that you try to do so. And staying curious. And I think I pointed towards those because I think that when we are in a place where we feel there are challenges, particularly when you're consuming all this stuff about what it means to work the best way, and then you're maybe somewhere where you're like, we're not working the way it says in the books or the way it says in the podcasts or the way it says in the conference that I went to, and you're hungry, you want to infect change, and then you're hitting some walls, and that can be the most frustrating thing. I think from my experience, but also from the observations from people that I've mentored, I've found that some of the most miserable that I've personally been, and some of the most miserable that I've seen some of the people I've mentored have been, is where they have left pragmatism at the door of where they went to. And that doesn't mean that like we should just accept things as they are. It means that we should hold on to pragmatism and see where we're trying to get to as a journey, and working through to the what are the baby steps to where we are. Because if you're here and you think you should be here, and you're just trying to get the organization to go from here to here, you will be intensely frustrated, you'll be intensely miserable. And so being pragmatic about what it takes to get to where we want to get to meet the organization where it's at here, and saying, okay, what is the sphere of influence that I do have? What's the baby step that I can help this organization make to get it towards here, as opposed to railing against the machine and the fact that I'm at A, we need to be at Z, but I can't get them to Z. Well, how about try and get them to B, and then after that, try and get them to C. Meet the organization where it's at, and also try and embrace learning outside of the scope within you're in. Some of the examples I gave in that talk were about you know being curious within the organization, not just about the thing that I'm doing, but about the business and what it takes to run that business, and that opening up all sorts of doors and opportunities for me within organizations. Getting into rooms I typically would not have gotten into, and learning what it means to sit in on very, very senior stakeholder conversations, purely from curiosity, purely from being like, okay, we're not here yet, but I think I can probably learn something here. I can probably add value here. I'm going to go and kind of try and do that, and being able to do that. So I think that meeting the organization where it's at is about trying to see that we may have a journey from A to Z, but like try and get to B first. Don't try and get to Z straight away, because that's where frustration lies. And curiosity generally is really, I think, if you're not a curious product person, then you're probably not going to be very good as a product person. Curiosity has to lie at the heart of everything we do within the organizations we work with, about the people we work with and for, about the customers that we're serving. You always have to stay curious, and I think that keeps it can keep some of those gremlins at bay if you can stay curious. And then intentionality is really about being intentional about what's important to you. I think sometimes when we end up in places and the environment isn't the thing that helps us thrive, it's because we've lacked clarity ourselves about what does make us thrive. Sometimes that's not the case. You're absolutely clear about what would make you thrive, and then you land somewhere and it's not. But sometimes I think it's because we need to do the work to actually be very intentional about kind of like understanding what it is that is important to you personally. So I use the phrase, think of it as your personal decision stack. So I don't know if you've come across the decision stack by Martin Erickson, which is about the decision stack for a product organization. So starting at, vision, mission, vision, strategy, and then and down from there. So think about this from a personal perspective. What is your vision and what is your mission? And then what's important? What are your principles that are kind of like, these are your non-negotiables wherever you go, right? Figuring that out for yourself, and then what are your own personal goals and what are your own personal priorities, and that helps you make better decisions about where you want to go and where you need to be. And then it's about how do you then use that to inform building your own growth roadmap. So again, this has been really intentional about understanding where you are, what your skills are, what your gaps are, which of those are most important to you to learn and grow and fill, and then figuring out a map for how you can do that. Which kind of organization is going to help you do that well? What scale of organization is going to help you do that well? What kind of industry, what kind of problems might serve the kinds of things you want to grow in, and then being able to map out the sorts of places you would like to end up and the non-negotiables for that. I think there's an intentionality around doing that, and it's something that after my time at Talis, where I spent just over 5 years, having spent so long in edtech, I was very, very intentional that I wanted to get experience in as many contexts as possible. I was also, at that time, I'd not really worked with other product people. So I was like, I want to work somewhere where there's a product team. So other people that I can bounce off. I'd not worked in B2C. So I was like, B2C is something that's interesting to me. There's just the scale of users that I'll get there. It's just going to be so much more than I've had in the B2B place I've been at. I was interested in that because it meant that I probably get to do things like experimentation at scale, which I just wasn't able to do where I was. And it was intensely frustrating to me that I couldn't. But again, this is about meeting the organization where it's at. It's like, there's no point getting frustrated that you can't do optimization tests and B2B, experimentation, B2C style experimentation in an environment that doesn't really enable or have the tools or skills to support that. So I was very clear about the things that I'd not yet got to do and the types of environment that I think might support that, and that really informed the sorts of roles that I took next. So that level of intentionality. And not everyone has to go to that extent, but I think just being clear about what's important, what your principles are, what your skill gaps are, and the kinds of places that might help you fill those would help you make better decisions. And then the other antidotes, I've talked about kind of meeting the org where it's at, intentionality.
Finding community, and
community.
being
And
curious, sphere of influence. So I think you covered
yeah,
mostly. I think you covered
yeah, I think
all.
so. Yeah. Okay. And then, of course, the last one, like I say, as one of the most important, which is the self-compassion and looking after yourself, prioritizing your self-care and being compassionate to yourself, I think underpins all of this.
Yeah. Being your best friend. Yeah, being your best friend, not only treating yourself like your best friend, or how you would like to be treated by your best friend. And
Exactly.
I'm also interested in what you said about the organization and support for your growth and for your goals and for your development. But I think being a female leader comes with unique challenges. Have you what have been some of the core challenges you've faced and how you have dealt with them?
Um, as I mentioned earlier, I've now worked in tech for going on 18 years, and I do think there are like a lot of differences between when I started in tech and now, um, just in attitude and culturally, you know, the way we understand what it means to have diverse working environments culturally has really shifted, I think, in the time that I've worked in tech. It's still not unusual to be one of few women in, particularly in the tech environment, but certainly in those 18 years, I can absolutely attest to the fact that's something I think has gotten better. I think about my time in the company that I started my career in tech in, and I absolutely was always the only woman on the team in every team that I was in. Um, and increasingly that has shifted. I'm seeing more women in our workspaces in different kinds of roles and it's always great when I see female engineers in particular, because a, a discipline that I think has definitely predominantly been male centered. um, what are the challenges? I think that when you work in predominantly male environments, there is something about, and again, this is something I've observed historically that I'm pleased to say I observe less these days, is you can find yourself in a very male cultured environment, just in terms of behavior, language, um, kind of men forgetting that there's women in the room and how they're talking to each other and about women. Something I see less and less of. So, um, but also I think that workplace dynamics definitely have improved, particularly as diversity and inclusion has become increasingly important to organizations. So it's wonderful to see organizations doing things like diversity training, which includes training about the different types of biases that we all bring to the workplace. And I think that's definitely made for an improvement in what it means to be a woman in the workspace. Sometimes I think at leadership level, I still think that we see less representation of women at leadership levels than there should be. Certainly, statistics speak towards that. I've been really fortunate though that I've been in organisations where women are represented at leadership level, and that's been really great to see. So at the FT right now, I'm a woman in leadership. The CPO is a woman. The CTO in FT Professional, the CTO of the company is a woman as well. This women are very well represented at leadership level, but I don't think that's by accident. I think that that's by design. I think that's because, for example, the FT as an organization is very much intentionally working on how it makes its workplace a diverse and inclusive environment. So I don't think these things happen by accident. In that, before people cared about diversity and inclusion, workspaces evolved naturally the way they evolved, and they evolved to only have, mostly male, mostly white people at senior and leadership levels in organizations. That's the way they naturally evolved, right? Until we had to start caring about the fact that workplaces were not inclusive. And the minute you start to do something about that intentionally, then you change the makeup of it. So I think that's what's important, that we, and that's not about uh, doing things performatively either. I think if you do it intentionally, then you can achieve the right outcomes. I think I have also seen workplaces where it's very performative, and I don't think you get the right outcomes for that either.
Um, and I'm also like thinking about like the growing number of women in leadership positions. You mentioned that you see this this happening across organizations, even in FT. I mean, especially in FT. And how can organizations like ensure that all employees feel valued and supported in an inclusive work environment?
It's about what I just said, which is being intentional in the fact that you recognize that having diverse workplaces and inclusive workplaces are ultimately better for your business. So with that, how do you actively recruit and promote diverse talent? How do you, so for, if we use somewhere like the FT, from the outside, um, people probably have a preconception about an organization like the Financial Times and how it's historically been made up and the sorts of people that would typically work there. I'm not immune from that. Before I went to work for the Financial Times, I definitely did have some preconceptions in my mind of the sorts of people that I'd encounter there. And then I got there and realized it was a quite inclusive, quite diverse environment. But then I learned about how they made that so, the sorts of initiatives that they invested in, so that people who would normally in their own minds just be like, well, it's not for me, it's not the sort of place I'd ever be hired at, it's not the sort of place I'd ever try and get a job because I probably wouldn't get hired. Doing the work to make sure that you are nurturing that talent from underrepresented spaces, being welcoming and inclusive for them, so that and putting programs in place that means that you are exposing um, the organization and people from underrepresented backgrounds to the organization, so that you build that pipeline of diverse talents coming into your organization. But once you get diverse talent into your organization, it doesn't stop there. I've certainly been in organizations that talk the talk, but once you get in them, don't really walk the walk. So it's about making sure that people do have the training for things like unconscious biases that we have, to raise awareness of those sorts of things and mitigate those biases. It's about having inclusive policies. You know, women are in the workplace, but women still are predominantly the primary caregiver, when in parental situations. So how do you build flexibility? How do you build inclusive policies that support the work-life balance, flexible hours, that kind of thing, that means that women can have a career, can be a parent? How do you balance it so that when you have things like parental leave policies that are equal for both the men and the women, so that men and fathers can take that responsibility when their wives have, you know, when their partners, their female partners have children? How do you create the policies so that anyone who's a parent, regardless of how they became a parent, can have that balance and that flexibility in their work life? They can hold a career and they can also still maintain that balance in their life. It's about a holistic approach within an organization, not just the you know, the lipstick on, or the paint on the front. It has to be the inside of the house as well, right? So it's also open dialogue within organizations to make sure that it's not it's not a thing that's relegated to like the department that's responsible for this, right? It's a thing that everyone cares about. I think that would be important, and I think leadership has a massive part to play, because I firmly believe, as a there's a saying, as a captain goes, so does the ship. I think that it has to be reflected in leadership. It has to be reflected in leadership attitudes, and it has to be reflected in how leadership supports diversity and inclusion within the organization.
Yeah, what you mentioned about the lipstick and like putting on the lipstick, because like from my personal experience, and like a lot of women uses the lipstick, yeah, and once you use like the red one, it can also like it can cover a lot, but also when it's like not well suited or well not put, it will show a lot. So it's like this double-edged sword, I would say.
Exactly. Yeah,
um,
definitely. Like I said, the I think my preferred analogy, the one I switched to, is the one about like you could paint the house and it could look amazing from the outside, but then you get in and
yeah,
structurally it's fallen apart.
yeah.
The foundations are rotten. So it's all well and good to be performative and say that you do the things, but if the experience that those people when they get inside the house have doesn't reflect the paint that you have on the outside, then you've got problems.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and right now I would like to like move again to your experience and like slowly wrap up the conversation.
Hmm.
And this is the question about building and leading effective teams. So you've built and led several product teams throughout your career. What are like the core principles you emphasize in building a successful product organization?
What is important in terms of building a successful product organization? Ooh, I think that something like Martin Erickson's decision SAT comes to mind. And it comes back to what I said at the beginning, which is that in the instances where I've been most successful, it's because I have done these things well. And the places where I've not been so successful, I think it's because I've not done these things so well. Ultimately, it comes down to clarity for the product's organization, making sure that there is clarity around your vision, your strategy, your principles, and that kind of direction for the team. And everyone is clear about like what we're rowing towards. And we've got a framework in place that allows those teams to make decisions. We've got the right guardrails in place of the types of decisions that they can make, and then we allow them to make those decisions that are rowing towards the direction that we have set, with clear goals, clear strategy, clear vision, all of those things. So that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is that we inherently have to understand, and you can't do any of those things without understanding what your business is trying to achieve, and that we're aligned, that what we've set there is aligned with what the business is trying to achieve, and that we're doing that collaboratively, and that we have the infrastructure in place that allows the teams to be successful. So it's all well and good to kind of say, oh, here's our vision and here's our strategy and our goals and the principles and the framework for making decisions and the guardrails for making decisions. Go off and make decisions, but we've not given you the infrastructure to actually be able to do those things. So you've got to make sure you have the right teams in place to achieve what you're trying to achieve. You've got to make sure that those teams have the right skills and capabilities, and if not, train them or coach them to get the right capabilities. You've got to make sure that the right tools are in place. You're telling our teams to be evidence driven and data informed, but we don't have the right data tools or the right data infrastructure or right data literacy in the organization to help them to do that. They don't have the right skills or understand how to do discovery. So this is what I mean by skills and capabilities, and the tools, the infrastructure to allow them to do that. And then I think the other thing is collaboration. Like, how do we collaborate within, not just within the product teams, but beyond the product teams? How do we bring our commercial colleagues along? How do we work closely and intimately with customer success? Because we can build all the products we want, but if we don't work very closely with the wider organization, then we're not going to be successful. I'd say those are the main things that are required for a successful product org. But ultimately, like, the fundamentals are the same no matter where you go. I think that, yeah, like deeply understanding our customers, the users and their problems. It doesn't matter where you go, what industry you're in, what size of company you're in. That is a first principle. And if we don't focus on doing that as well as delivering impact for the business, then it doesn't matter where you go, you won't be successful. And then from a leadership perspective, I think for me, there's no cookie cutter version of product. Yes, there are those fundamental principles, but the context that we're in is always important. To take the time to understand the context, understand the people, and no matter what the type of problem it is that we're trying to solve or the challenge, I think if those things are in place, then you're probably okay. Yeah.
Okay. So, like, let me summarize it. So it's about aligning business goals, knowing the context of the organizations, and being user-centric, together with giving our PMs the right skills, tools, and frameworks for their work, and giving them freedom to work actually and to deliver great results.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and reflecting on our conversation, if you could give like one crucial piece of advice for product managers, for product leaders, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I guess based on what we've been talking about, seeing as we have talked a lot about the Gremlins, I think the thing I'd say to any product manager that's out there, I don't know who needs to hear this today, right? We are all we're all consuming everything that's out there, and there's a lot of great stuff out there. But I think it can sometimes mean that we are overwhelmed with what it means to be a good product manager, and the overwhelmed with all the lessons that we're getting about what that means. So I don't even know if this is advice that I am giving. I think I just want to say, like, if there's one product manager or many product people listening to this today, I don't know who needs to hear it, but I know that you are doing your best. And so continue to do your best, continue to stay curious, and continue to be kind to yourself along the way. You're going to be okay. It's going to be fine. That's the thing I want to tell whoever's listening to this out there today, because someone might need to hear that.
Thank you, Keji, for that great advice. It's a great advice. I think many people will appreciate what you just said, because we all struggle sometimes. And I think more often that we admit.
Yeah.
And what upcoming projects or personal adventures you're most excited about?
I'm going to be taking a little break. I'm going to explore doing some coaching. And I'm also going to explore potentially turning some of my creative ideas for side passion projects into main projects. So I've got a bit of a former life as a musician. And so I'm very interested in kind of things to do with the music industry, and particularly hip hop. So I've got like these passion projects that have been nurturing and noodling for a while that I might try and do something a little bit more with. So that's something I might be working on. But mostly I'm going to take a little bit of a break for now and explore doing some coaching while I figure out what is next for me.
So if our listeners would like to connect with you or learn more about your work, where they can find you online?
LinkedIn is where I live at the moment. I'm probably not the best person on LinkedIn, to be honest. I think I don't keep up to date with it as much as I should. But LinkedIn is where you can reach me, and I will endeavor to stay on top of that.
Okay, thank you, Keji, for our conversation. It's an honor and pleasure for me to speak with you, because 1 year ago, I was like watching you on TV. And right now I'm speaking with you. So it's a huge pleasure for me, an honor, and really thank you for everything. And thank you for stop being silent and speaking your truth.
Thank you so much, Beata. Thank you for the kind feedback and for inviting me to have a chat with you today. It's been a fun chat. Thank you.
Thanks for joining me on another episode of Doing It My Way by Beata Matras. If you enjoyed this episode, please do not forget to subscribe. Remember, this podcast is a dynamic journey and your feedback is very welcomed. Connect with me on social media. I would like to hear your thoughts, questions, and topic suggestions. And stay tuned for upcoming episodes. And until next time, keep doing it your way.